So Nintendo just said something very interesting about the future of Legend of Zelda games that we need to unpack today, because if you're somebody like me, you're probably thoroughly enjoying the new era of Zelda games that we are in with Breath of the Wild and now Tears of the Kingdom. But if you are a lifelong Zelda fan, you might still be missing some of what the more traditional linear style Zelda games had all the way back to the 2D era, with A Link to the Past really starting that kind of linear progression formula and more story heavy aspects of Zelda games. Then you had it brought into 3D with Ocarina of Time and really cementing that gameplay style for multiple mainline 3D Zelda entries to come, with a rare sequel within the franchise leading to Majora's Mask. Then of course we got to sail the open seas within Wind Waker, which to this day has one of my favorite stories of any Zelda game period, and I honestly enjoy playing it start to finish, through and through, anytime I get a chance to. And we saw that followed up with a much more realistic, dark take on Zelda with Twilight Princess. More of a direct love letter to the style of game that Ocarina of Time was, but really elevating certain points of that formula and taking it to that next level. And while Skyward Sword was a big miss for me the first time around on the Wii when the motion controls were the only way to play the game, I thoroughly enjoyed the HD remaster that we saw release on the Switch, where you could choose to play with the analog to move your sword or those motion-based controls depending on how you wanted to play it. And it quite honestly has, in my opinion, the deepest story out of any of these Zelda lore stories that we've seen over all of the entries. However, I did find that the dungeon layout and progression of the game in Skyward Sword really didn't feel quite as memorable to me as other 3D Zelda games. And I do think you can argue that with that game, Nintendo kind of really took a step back and looked at the core formula of what is a Zelda game and what kind of experience do players want to have within it. And that is when we got Breath of the Wild in March of 2017. That totally changed the rules on what a 3D Zelda game can be, going in that complete open world direction where doesn't matter what divine beast you want to conquer first, or if you want to fight them at all, you can technically go straight to the end of the game after the Great Plateau if you would like to, or you can explore a massive land of Hyrule, the biggest map by far we've ever seen in a Zelda game up to that point in time. You can go play the game how you want, progress the story in the way you see fit, and we now have what I would consider to be an even higher level of a masterpiece of a game with Tears of the Kingdom, where of course we are revisiting that same Hyrule map that we know and love from Breath of the Wild, but we have it expanded massively with an entire depths in the underground section of the map. And then you also have Sky Islands above, and we have somewhat of a return to form in terms of dungeons, although I would still argue it's very much a mid-step from what we got on the more traditional end of 3D games. And that's really where a lot of the divide happens, is some people love the new formula and they love the new type of Zelda experiences that we've had these last couple games, and they just want it to remain in this direction for the entire foreseeable future of the franchise. And that may indeed be what we see Nintendo stick to, but there's definitely a very vocal corner of the internet that also wants some kind of support for the more linear classical style of 3D Zelda games, or 2D Zelda games even. And I am one of those people that I would like to see both developed alongside of each other, because we know that development cycles are longer and longer than they ever have been before, and theoretically we may be waiting around until something like 2030 for the next major open world mainline Zelda game. And I would certainly love to play something else in 2D or 3D until then that's an original story and that sticks to some more of those traditional mechanics. And now to tackle exactly what Nintendo has said about this in a recent interview, let's quickly hop over to My Nintendo News and read through their detailed typed up article together. Aonuma on classic Zelda gameplay returning. It's difficult to say anything about the future. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has been available to play on the Nintendo Switch for nearly 2 months now. Since then, the Legend of Zelda series producer Eiji Aonuma has discussed multiple topics related to the game and the series as a whole in interviews. Unsurprisingly, one of the topics has been about traditional classic Zelda gameplay. Aonuma has commented about the matter previously, but in an interview with RTL News that was translated by Nintendo Everything, he elaborated a little more about the matter. Aonuma said that it's difficult to say anything about the future. That being said, thanks to previous Zelda games, a game like Tears of the Kingdom now exists. This game originated from the ideas that we had in the past. We always try to create something that offers more than previous titles. In that respect, we really aren't concerned with our older games anymore. We prefer to look to the future. Now, clearly with a comment like that, that's somewhat vague, he's not outright saying we will never return to a more traditional type of Zelda game, but he does make it very clear that the formula that you see in Tears of the Kingdom is the culmination of all of the years of work and ideas that they've put into the Zelda series, and we've had previous comments from Aonuma stating that this Breath of the Wild open world formula is really something of the loose footprint to expect for future Zelda games, because the same way that Ocarina of Time kind of created a formula for 3D Zelda games, this is kind of that for the new modern era we find ourselves in, and some may find that disappointing. I personally could play a Zelda game like Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild over and over and be extremely happy with each playthrough, but I would be lying if I didn't say that there was that part of me that wants more of those crazy massive dungeons that are a huge focal point of the game, and maybe even unlockable items within the dungeon that you have to unlock in a certain order to progress through the story, and having some of the story elements unfold as part of that natural progression. However, you do have to step back and realize that even if you are a lifelong series fan like I am for Legend of Zelda, that the type of success and the type of mass market appeal that we are seeing since Breath of the Wild and now with Tears of the Kingdom has just flat out never been done for the series before, and it would be silly for Nintendo to go backwards to an idea of a more traditional linear style Zelda game where they've never seen not even a fraction of the success that we are seeing with Breath of the Wild and with Tears of the Kingdom. It is clear that the modern gamer that picks up a Zelda game now for the Switch prefers this open world, open exploration style, and to be fair, it fits the Zelda franchise in a fantastic way. And again, I can't say enough great things about Tears of the Kingdom. I am just about at the end of the game. I won't spoil anything. I am purposely holding off on finalizing the story just because I really do want to get more and more things and not rush it, but I'm at that point now where I can confidently say that it is an excellent experience through and through, and it's honestly my favorite game of 2023 by far and away, and it's one of my favorite games of all time, period. That said, there is still definitely a part of me that would love to see more support for 2D and 3D Zelda games with an original story that get developed alongside of what the next mainline 3D Zelda game will be, and one that maybe won't take 6 to 7 years of development time, but rather one that you could crank out in 3 or 4 years maximum, and then we have something to play that is a new fresh Zelda experience while we are waiting on them to craft the next bigger massive step in the franchise. As Aonuma said, they like to outdo themselves on each Zelda game and make each one bigger and better. Well, bigger and better also equates to more time, especially when you're tackling that open world formula, and in theory you would assume them not to probably return to this same Hyrule with whatever next open world Zelda game that they have in the holster for whatever year that ultimately comes out. You would assume that maybe it's even going to take them longer because they have to create a brand new Hyrule. It may have a whole different graphical style than what Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have, especially if it's not any kind of direct sequel. So we have to wait and see what the future of Zelda games ultimately look like, but I am hopeful that this comment from Aonuma doesn't cement the fact that we can't ever have new experiences in the more traditional Zelda style of games, but rather that maybe they can do something of a tick-tock cycle where every 3 to 4 years we get something new, and it's more of a classic traditional style Zelda game that has an original story, or even some ports and remasters that they could still dip into that we're waiting for at this point in time to get us by. But I'm hopeful we're not going to be waiting 6 to 7 years in between mainline 3D Zelda releases without having supplemental games to play in the meantime, and I don't think that the Zelda team will do that. It is just too much of a moneymaker for Nintendo as a franchise to wait that long in between mainline releases without providing the fan base something brand new to pick up and some brand new type of gameplay experience. But I really want to hear from you guys, your personal thoughts and opinions around this topic. How do you feel about the current direction of Zelda games, with the most recent release being Tears of the Kingdom, and Aonuma's comments with this? Do you think that this gives us any kind of information or more insight into the fact that they may be planning just only open world Zelda from here, and that's all we can ever expect from the franchise? Or do you think, like me, that there's a chance that we still get those open world Zelda mainline games every 6 or 7 years, but then we also see something supplementally developed every 2, 3, or even 4 years that is more of a traditional linear 3D style Zelda or even 2D type of game? And what would you personally like to see from the franchise with its next release? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before we leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.